Hey, everybody. I have a special guest on today. His name is Michael. And yeah, he's got quite the story as to why he looks like Santa Claus. And it's not what you might think. So I just wanted to bring your awareness to some of these things because I felt like it would be really beneficial information for y'all to know. So, Michael, could you please, where do we start? Could you, uh, well, where do you think we should start? Well, like, how did you even realize, or how did you come to realize that the system is as tainted as it is? When did you start
Well,
awakening to how crazy this whole, and when I mean the system to what you're pertaining to, I mean the legal system.
right. So I've lived in New York most of my life. We moved here. My father was active duty Marine Corps for 20 years. We moved here when I was about 5 years old. I'm in Westchester County. Westchester County borders just above New York City. We're home to, the Rockefellers, Cuomo, the Clintons, and a lot of other prominent people, George Soros, that people would probably recognize as being part of the cabal. So if you're in this county for a number of years, you're going to have influence, right? So growing up, I just saw things and I was told things that were clearly corrupt and not on the up and up. Uh, Years ago, I think in the 70s, there was an FBI investigation about the corruption in Yonkers, and it started with, Yonkers, the city of hills, where nothing is on the level. So I always had an understanding of that. But I didn't realize how bad it was until I went to get a divorce. I filed for divorce. Um,
When was this?
this was in 2017.
Okay.
I won't get into all the sordid details, but I filed for divorce. And I also filed the first petitions in family court. And family court is where it really started to show me just how bad it was and just how corrupt the entire divorce and family court system is. And I'd say it's not just the state courts that are corrupt, but also the federal courts. And I would submit it's also nationwide, not just New York.
Well, and you are an attorney, right?
Yes, yes.
And
I
you
was admitted to
represent
practice.
yourself.
Right. I'm still admitted to practice. I retired from the practice of law, which means that I can't do it as a living, but I can represent people pro bono if I want to. And I've only
Okay.
taken one case like that, and that's in family court. And again, there's absolute, clear, unequivocal corruption going on.
Okay. So can you describe for people who are watching this and are like shocked and they're like, what are you even talking about? Can you take us through a process that you know of that's kind of how it operates?
Right. So some of this is also what I believe uh, to be true based on my experience, as well as things that I've actually found. And I'll be able to cite certain authorities. And when I can, I'll do so. So typically, when people are together, whether you're married or not, you start off with an argument that leads to somebody filing papers in family court. Uh, and then from family court, if you're married, it progresses to Supreme Court, at least in New York, where you have to file for a divorce. And the family court proceedings get merged with the Supreme Court, with the divorce. The problem with filing in family court is our entire judicial system is based on truth, right? Everybody has to take an oath if they're going to testify. After you file a certain set of documents, you have to sign at the end saying that this is true to the best of your knowledge. If not, it's asserted on information and belief, and you believe that to be true. Standard stuff. If that's not the case, then that's considered a frivolous claim. Frivolous claims are prohibited in both federal and state courts, except for three types of cases in family court. And that's because the chief administrative judge has actually put out a rule that exempts these three types of cases from frivolous litigation. So in other words, an attorney can just go in there and actually make up stuff, complete fabrication, sign it, have her client or his client sign the papers, knowing that they're false, submit them. The judge can look at them and know that they're clearly false, but he can't do a thing about it, or he doesn't have to do a thing about it. As opposed to a standard case where the judge is required to actually take action, right? It's under his or her judicial, the rules of judicial conduct, where they have to take action on it. But in these three types of family court cases, they don't. So that's step one. I mean, you're starting off behind the eight ball with fabricated allegations. How do you even defend against that? And everybody pretends that it's true. So let's say in my case, they came in, they were saying that, I was dangerous for whatever reasons, complete fabrication, but then CPS gets involved. And CPS gets involved, and of course, they're slanted. They didn't even bother looking at the 120 documents that I gave them supporting my position, not until I actually mentioned it to them. The children, they say, need their own lawyer to protect the children's interests. Well, stop. The U.S. Supreme Court has said several times for several decades that the parents have an absolute right to control who associates with their children, right? Parental rights, First Amendment freedom of association rights, and also the right to not speak, to remain silent, even outside of the criminal concept. Under the First Amendment, you have an absolute right to not speak. Well, by appointing an attorney for the children, you completely eliminate the parental rights, right, and the freedom of association. Now, here I'm talking about fit parents. Fit parents means that they have provided, according to U.S. Supreme Court cases, the minimum standard of care or level of care for their children. So the children are not abused and they're not neglected. If that's the case, then you're in a different category. What I'm saying here doesn't apply to you. So the attorney for the children, and inevitably, they're going to have a certain opinion as to how things should go. So they kind of start stacking the deck against the disfavored party. And how you become a disfavored party can come about several ways. In my case, my ex-wife, now ex-wife, I strongly suspect bought justice. Justice is for sale in the Westchester County Courthouse in New York State. And I'm on record saying that. I've filed it in several papers, both in federal and state courts. But nobody's given me a forum to where I can get discovery and try and prove whether that's true or not. Why not? I mean, if somebody can point to and articulate specific facts and circumstances that lend to the possibility of corruption in a court system, wouldn't you want to give that person the opportunity to root that out, right? Expose it and get rid of it? No. Instead, it's concealed, it's covered up, it's ignored repeatedly. So those are other instances of how I don't just believe, I know that the system is corrupt. The judge in my divorce trial falsified my trial transcripts. I'm certainly, right? So of course, because my wife bought justice, things didn't go the way they should have gone in the divorce trial. So I have to appeal that decision. But when you appeal a decision, there's a presumption of regularity. In other words, everybody presumes that the judge was honest, that the rules were followed, that everything was on the up and up, that nobody had a secret agenda, that there wasn't a secret handshake club going on, or somebody paid somebody under the table to get a certain outcome. So the only way you can attack that, or at least the only way I've been able to determine how to attack that, is through a collateral proceeding, right? So I have to bring another lawsuit against the judge and get that discovery so that I can prove that she was corrupt. She's not entitled to the presumption of regularity. And then with that, I can go to the appeal and say, I need a new trial. And then we go back. I mean, the judge really stole about $500,000 from me. Yeah, it's insane. I haven't had any contact with my children for over 3.5 years now. I got arrested twice for trying to have contact with them. And I was a good father. I was a good father. I had an excellent relationship with both of my children. Both of my children were adopted from infancy. My ex-wife was actually in the delivery room for my daughter, and my son came home to us when he was 5 days old. So I'm the only father they've ever known. And they're already dealing with parental separation, right? And as the judge acknowledged, they're already somewhat fragile. So to remove me in those circumstances, especially when I did nothing wrong, we had an excellent relationship, it's actual child psychological abuse under the DSM-5. I don't have the page number offhand, but I can get it for you if you're interested. It's there.
Mm. So, wow. So what would, I mean, other than money, what would be another purpose for this system? I would assume that it would fuel the satanic system behind the scenes somehow, sex trafficking and things like that. So what have you witnessed, or what do you know about that trail? How does that work?
So interesting that you ask. So the way it works, once you get the divorce trial, they assign a judge to do pre-trial matters. He does the discovery, et cetera, and he gets the case allegedly ready for trial. Then he sends it out to the supervising judge. The supervising judge looks to see which judge is available to do a trial, and he sends it to one of them. In Westchester, there are 4 judges and a supervising judge, all assigned to the matrimonial part. I was never given discovery. In fact, the judge that I originally had was relieved, from my understanding, from what I'm actually told by somebody, let alone my personal observations. He was removed from the matrimonial part because of what he did. He assigned an attorney for the children that was precluded from serving as a private pay attorney for the children. That's where the courts actually make the parents pay the fees of the court appointees, whether it's the forensic evaluator, the attorney for the children, whoever the judge wants to throw into the case. And that's completely unconstitutional as well. And the U.S. Supreme Court has spoken on that, not exactly for divorce court, but for other cases. You just can't do that, right? So anyway, they ignored my citations to compelling U.S. Supreme Court cases and all that. They said that it was ready for trial, and it wasn't. The trial judge directed falsification of documents, and that falsified documents be filed with the court clerk. I have unequivocal proof of that. And it got sent to the supervising judge. And I explained to the supervising judge what was happening. He had complete authority to send this back and allow me more discovery. Instead, he sent it out to a judge, not in the matrimonial part, but in the commercial part. Why would you send and believe me, during the conduct of the trial, it was clear that she didn't know the law with respect to either divorce or family law. She just didn't. She couldn't even describe the doctrine of parens patriae, which is a basic concept when you get into family law, right? So anyway, so I did some research on this supervising judge. I'm sorry for a long-winded explanation, but I want the
This is great.
viewers to understand what's going on here. So I did some research on the supervising judge, and he has a picture of himself posted with a bio. In his bio, it says that he's a member of a secret society, the Knights of Pythias. Now, why is a judge, supervising judge no less, a member of a secret society? Seems very odd. So I did some research on the Knights of Pythias. And they are heavily affiliated with Freemasonry, right? Freemasons. In fact, I'm told that Freemasons actually established the Knights of Pythias, etc., and they have to take an oath. And in that oath, they say that they swear to not engage in, don't quote me exactly on this, but I'm paraphrasing, that they will not engage in violent acts that violate the civil rights or rights of other people. Well, why would you limit it to just violent acts? So a violent act, you can't beat somebody up and take their money. But it's perfectly acceptable, according to this oath, to stand up there or sit up there as a judge, pretending that you're neutral, but meanwhile you're not. And you're throwing all the decisions for the favored party. Doesn't seem right. But anyway, that's where we are. So I go down to see this judge for the trial. And it turns out that she served as the law clerk for Alan Shankman. Alan Shankman was the Westchester County attorney. I have absolute proof that he's engaged in corruption because he hired me. And I didn't know it at the time, but there was corruption going on in me getting hired. He went on to become a judge of the New York State Supreme Court, then a supervising judge of the Ninth District, and then eventually the supervising judge or presiding justice of the New York State Appellate Division's Second Judicial Department. He's the third most powerful judge in New York State. And because of his position, his wife is precluded from taking certain types of cases. Well, and one of them is the private pay case, right, in divorce and family law proceedings. Well, his wife, Faith G. Miller, was appointed as the attorney for the children in private pay cases, my private pay cases, in both family court and divorce court, or Supreme Court. So I knew that was wrong. And we'll get into, what I did in response to that later if you want. But I started doing even more digging on the judicial system and just how high, does this go? Because now I clearly had corruption, at least up to the appellate division level, the third most powerful judge. So I started doing research on other judges out there. And I noticed that a lot of the judges for the New York Court of Appeals, the highest court in New York State, seem to always take their picture in front of this one, I don't know, I called it a mural at the time but it had some odd paintings in the background. So I started doing research on that. And lo and behold, I found the official portrait of former Chief Judge Jonathan Lippman, who was standing in front of, turned out to be the fireplace, actually inside the courtroom of the New York Court of Appeals. And on it, it had various panels, right? Or what I call panels, 4 different sections.
Okay.
And he was standing to the left as you're looking at it. And over one shoulder, to me anyway, as well as several of the people that I've spoken to, there's this tortured face that you can see. And over the other shoulder, it seemed like this face with a bird pecking out an eye. And I said, yeah, this is absurd. So I did some more research and I found on the next panel, there seemed to be several faces there, to include what appears to me to be a Draco reptilian and a Dobby. Now, a Draco reptilian, many people probably now know what it is, but this fireplace was created over 140 years ago. It was imported from Mexico. It was made of the finest onyx, according to official court documents from Mexico. So whoever heard of Draco reptilians then? Or a Dobby, just like you're probably thinking of Harry Potter, and that would be accurate. You go and you do some research, and the Dobby is actually a real thing. It's a house djinn, or
A house what?
a house djinn, Jinn, a house Dobby, a house demon, right? They're demons,
What?
they're interdimensional. So there's this picture, and it looks exactly like the Dobby, right? The character Dobby in Harry Potter. Well, again, Harry Potter only came out fairly recently. This fireplace was made 140 years ago.
Wow.
So they didn't get the idea or inspiration from Harry Potter. So where did it
Right.
And this, I would love to see if you, with any of your contacts, could provide any insight into this. Like, this fireplace that's in the New York Court of Appeals. Who made it? Where did it come from? Why are there so many apparent, really evil and demonic and horrible looking figures on it? And then if you go all the way to the right, the far right panel, if you will, of this fireplace, you have several faces with the eyes that are just empty, circular, and they look like corpses. So I looked at that and I interpreted this as a satanic ritual. You have the torture phase, then you have the consumption phase, with the bird pecking the eye out. You have the various demons or entities that are involved, or perhaps they're just the observers. And then you have the final phase, which is death. You have the remains. And this has been in the New York Court of Appeals for over 140 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So I
That's
did some more
crazy.
research on the New York Court of Appeals, and you see the Masonic symbol on one of the older versions of the courthouse on the floor of the veranda. So I believe that there is heavy influence of not just satanic rituals, but evil, the Freemasonry, which we now all know the higher echelons are engaged in satanic rituals, right? Child torture, crimes against humanity. It's horrible. And that's been throughout our entire system. And it really makes sense. And it brings to mind a decision, another U.S. Supreme Court decision, in the case name of New York State Board of Elections versus Lopez Torres. This one judge from New York City wanted to be nominated for a judgeship. She wanted to be put on the ballot. The party leader of her district or her area said, no, you're not going to get it. I'm going to give it to somebody else. And she felt that wasn't fair. So she sued, made it all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and she wound up losing. But Justice Scalia, writing the opinion for the court, acknowledged that political party bosses selected, not elected, selected individuals to run for judgeship. And he said, even though that's a bad practice, we don't recommend it. The Constitution doesn't prohibit it. So they're entitled to do what they want to do. But hopefully they'll come up with something reasonable, essentially. Well, they haven't. They haven't changed the system at all. So then you ask, well, who are these political party bosses? What are the criteria that they're selecting these judges for that impact people's lives, their children's, their businesses, their homes? It's absolutely outrageous. And when you consider all of that, with this one website, it's called Erasing Family, I believe.
Erasing family?
Right, Erasing Family. For example, I'm a case of a parent who's being erased because I have absolutely no contact with my children, and for no apparent reason, none, no justifiable reason. So, according to this website, there are 25 million people in North America, not just America, the United States, although we have a lion's share of that, right? There are 25 million people in North America that are being erased from their families because of court orders. Just to think of how much loosh that creates, how much hate and discontent. I mean, it's an absolute fact. It's actually part of a law. There were findings made that say that children do better with the presence of both a mother and a father. New York State policy is that joint custody is preferred. So if that's the case, how are you eliminating so many people? It's absolutely absurd. They're destroying families. They're ruining children's lives. It's horrible. It's absolutely horrible, and it needs to be stopped.
It's shocking. Do you think they're putting them in the foster care system also to ritually abuse those children? Or like, what do you think your ex-wife's plan for your children were? Like, what was up? Was she just being mean? Or do you think she has a plan to do something with the kids? Or
she has serious issues.
wow.
She exhibited, during the course of the trial, she exhibited the two remaining criteria for the diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. And she has exhibited sufficient criteria to be diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder as well as antisocial personality disorder, a sociopath. So when you're dealing with somebody like that, you really don't know what their motivation is, right? Especially her, I came to find out, and this is what really led to things being so horrible. I don't want to get into that. I'm sorry. But she was not the person who she presented herself to be when we were dating and throughout the entire marriage. She was a closeted bisexual and sex addict, to include incest and pedophilia. So it's out there. I'm done. And I actually put that in my papers that I recently filed with the Supreme Court. So the trial judge in my divorce couldn't care less about pedophilia, incest. So to bring it back to your question, do I think they're putting in, or are they doing this for reasons related to foster care, etc.? It's very possible. I don't have any personal knowledge. I can't speak to that because that's not the scenario that I was dealing with. So I haven't done any personal research on that. But it's certainly within the realm of possibility. I mean, if you have satanic ritual fireplaces in the highest court of New York State for over 140 years, with the judges proudly taking their official portraits in front of them, both of the entire court as well as the official painting portrait of one of the chief judges. And this chief judge was also the chief administrative judge. It was his personal rule that allowed fabricated allegations to be filed in family court. So, and then I have pictures of another former chief judge giving a Masonic handshake, wearing satanic ritual colors all the time, and red shoes. And we've heard
what are the satanic ritual colors, so everyone knows?
The black robe with a red shirt or red scarf underneath, as well as red shoes, right?
So red and black.
Red and not just red, but blood red, right? And she was famous for that.
Like Santa Claus?
Exactly. No, that's bright red. I mean, deep red, almost like the red that I'm having on.
Like the darker red. Yeah.
Yeah. Dark blood red.
But they're just behind a lot of this. Yeah.
Yeah. A picture of this one former chief judge, a female, who was with a picture of, I presume to be her husband, and her husband's had the same kind of eyebrows that Anton LaVey used to have, with the pointed, symbolizing, the horns, same exact kind. So there are a lot of coincidences. You can't just pick out one and say, aha. But when you have a series of pictures, and she was famous for wearing these certain earrings. By now, people probably familiar with the squiggly line, right? Like the circle, meaning the pedophilia symbol. She had earrings like that, and she would wear it all the time.
Wow.
Satanic. She would pictures taken, giving the Masonic hand sign like this, the M for Mason. So you add all these different pictures up with the rules of the court, which you can't be questioned, with this fireplace, satanic ritual fireplace. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all to have these people funneling children to foster care so that they can be abused. And even if that's not the case, I mean, think of how much loosh would be created by millions of children and their parents just being ripped apart for no reason.
Oh gosh. Well, can you explain what loosh is to people who don't know what that is?
So everybody has a certain life force, right? Energy. And when we get upset, we emit some of that energy into the environment. And there are beings, I'm told, at least from people that I find to be credible, right? I don't have any personal experience with this. There are beings out there that feed off of this energy, kind of like vampires, right? Energy vampires. So the more you can get somebody to feel pain and to be upset, they emit this energy. It also adrenalizes their blood. And that's where you get into this whole adrenochrome thing and crimes against humanity, as well as these spirit beings that feed off of the energy that's being emitted from the bodies.
Well, what's really crazy about all this too is the legal system, from what I gather, it really actually has no leg to stand on. It's all just a false, just a big con system. It's really not built on a solid foundation, and even the Constitution isn't even valid right now. And there's so many things that, people think that, I can't even, it opens up such a rabbit hole. But they have no power, but they keep acting like they do. Kids, we keep giving it to them. Is that right?
Well, yes and no. I mean, also they take it too. I mean, there's only
Right.
so much that we can do being peaceful citizens, right? They control the police, all the federal law enforcement, etc., state law enforcement, local, you name it. So they have the power. Um, but
I mean,
you
even,
are right in a sense in that we do give it to them sometimes. I have, in fact, once things settle down and some more assets are made available, I intend to file two class action lawsuits. One against the all village courts within the county. Village courts are absolutely unconstitutional, and every judge can be sued, as well as the village, as well as town courts. That's the second one. And because of all this that's been going on, I've been called to task in both village and town courts. And so I did some research into that. Um, Under New York State statute, right? There's no question. And let me back up. I understand that there's a big movement right now with common law, and people are saying, because they're the corporation, we rest on common law, they're illegitimate, etc. And I won't get into that right now. But assuming that, let's put that argument aside. Let's just take the court system as it is now, the corporate U.S. and corporate state, corporate towns, etc. Even according to their own laws, every single village and town court in New York State, I submit, is unconstitutional. And this is why. In New York State, there's a law. It's under the judiciary law. I believe it's section 220. Don't quote me on that. It specifically says that every judge of these courts shall be paid by the state. Village and town courts are not listed in that. So if the village and town courts judges are not listed in that, who pays them? The village and town does. Well, how do they get the money? Taxes is one thing, but their biggest income revenue, from what I'm told, is the court system. So every judge that's up there has a financial interest in getting money from whoever appears before him.
whoa.
Under the judiciary law, I believe it's section 14, a judge must disqualify himself if he has a financial interest in a case. And they even go in to say that, well, if he has I think it's a certain percentage of stock in an insurance company, that doesn't count. So they take into account, I guess, everyday instances, but they don't take into account the fact of his salary being paid by the proceeds of the fines and fees that are being paid by the people in front of him. And then judiciary law section 19, I believe it is, it says that a judge also shall not have any interest in the costs of litigation. So we have both. We have fees, costs, whatever you want to call it. It's covered between section 14 and section 19. That judge must recuse himself. And because he's disqualified as a matter of law under New York State law, he is stripped of all jurisdiction, both personal and subject matter jurisdiction. What does that mean? Federal law says that you cannot sue a judge. He is immune. You can't even sue him. As soon as another judge sees that you named a judge in the lawsuit, he throws out the case or dismisses him. You can't even name him in a lawsuit unless you can prove that he lacks all jurisdiction, personal and subject matter. Well, I just explained to you that village and town justices do. They lack all personal and subject matter jurisdiction. So that means you can sue them. So that's just the judge. Then we get into the corporation, right? Because every village and town is incorporated. Well, under New York General Business Law, section 249 and 250, those two sections prohibit deceptive business practices. And you can actually get punitive damages, I believe it's under section 250, for deceptive business practices. Well, if you walk into a courtroom, right, and the judge, and this actually happened to me, the judge is always going to want you to say that you understand what he's saying. Don't ever say yes. Don't ever tell a government employee that you understand what they're saying, because they interpret that to mean, in their sick scheme of saying, you stand under my authority. No. Say, no, I don't understand what you're saying. And if they say, well, then you can't, then you need an attorney to understand, to work for you. And that's the kiss of death, because the attorney will be corrupt and he will torpedo your case and he still get paid. It's happened to me. I can tell you, I can go on about that. So what you want to do in rebut to that is say, no, I comprehend the words that you're saying, but I do not stand under your authority. Just put it out there, just like that. And I had to do that several times with this one judge who eventually recused himself and admitted that he was prejudiced and biased against me. But I only got that to happen by threatening to sue the senior judge because he wasn't supervising the more junior judge. And once I did that, he came in and he made things right. And just so happens I happen to be in the fire department with that senior judge. So he had to recuse himself from a personal relationship that he had with me. But he set things right. And I respect him for that. But what this other guy did, others will try to do to you and probably your viewers. Don't ever say that you understand what a government official is telling you. Say, no, I do not understand. I comprehend your words, but I do not stand under your authority, period. So anyway, because these judges lack all personal and subject matter jurisdiction, you can now name them as a defendant in a federal lawsuit. And because the corporation, the court, right, and the town is not telling you that they don't have authority over you, that all of this is a big hoax. Well, that's fraud. How many people would say, yes, I want to pay this fine, even though I don't have to? Nobody would. They would say, no, I'm out of here. See you later. Well, because they hide that from you, that's fraud. They took the money from you, pretending that they had jurisdiction. They didn't. So now you can sue the town as well for deceptive business practices and get punitive damages. When you combine those two cases together against the judges and the town, the court, you have a very strong case. And every single person that has ever paid a penny to a village or town court in New York State, or has ever been sentenced to jail time by a village or town court, has a valid claim. At least that's my position, based on my research, personal experience, and 20 years of practicing law in both federal, state, and local courts, trial level and the appellate level.
I just got that you're going to win.
Wow, I hope so. Because
and you're
if
going
I
to set
do,
the precedent.
I'm sorry.
You're going to show a lot of people what can be done.
I hope so, because when I do it, it's not going to be just for me. It's going to be for everybody. So at some point, maybe, I'll be looking for potential plaintiffs, people with very high damages, and then we'll get everybody else under that.
Why don't you, this is a good time to explain this. So what's up with the beard?
So I filed for divorce in October, November 2017. And then my ex-wife lied. CPS was involved. The judge was involved. She appointed this attorney that shouldn't have been appointed. CPS, don't get me started. The attorney for the children actually helped the judge, the first judge in family court, get it elected to her position. She did bankruptcy law for over 20 years. So she was completely biased against me as well. She eventually entered the first no contact order at the request of the attorney for the children, the wife of the supervising judge, Alan Shankman, at her request. And there was absolutely no basis for it. So that really upset me. It took me almost 3 years before I was able to finally have a decent night's sleep. I couldn't sleep.
Wow.
And I would think about them routinely, every day, several times a day. And then about 10 months into not having any contact with my children, one day I realized that I hadn't thought about my children the entire day, the day before. And that scared me. And I didn't want to be erased. I didn't want my children to be erased from my memory. So I needed to do something that would remind me of them every day. And I promised myself that I would not shave until we were reunited. And I hate this beard. I absolutely hate this beard. You have to groom it. Food gets caught in it, gets caught in your mouth. I absolutely hate it. I can't wait to get rid of it. But every time it bothers me, I think of how, excuse me, how it's going to be gone when my children and I are reunited. Unfortunately, I had to trim it a few months back because it was getting so long it would get stuck underneath me when I was sleeping at night. So that was affecting me. Yeah, I'd roll over
to make a
onto it
little
and-
bun.
Yeah, no, I don't do man buns of any type. That's not me. Yeah, so we'll have to wait.
Oh,
I suspect I wouldn't be surprised if my daughter dyes it blue or something before I shave it. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it being gone for several reasons.
do you get any kind of reassurance that they're even okay?
I asked for it. I was specifically denied that. I don't even get updates.
This is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And for those that may not understand also why his ex-wife was so different when they were dating and when they were married and stuff, one thing you guys should know is that though there are a lot more people in the satanic system in our world than you would ever know. They're your neighbors. You've worked beside them. You've dated some of them. I'm starting to believe that the psychopaths that we've dated, the ones that are really severe and really effed up, they were probably a part of the satanic ritual abuse system. And it's more common than you guys would know, and they hide it. They will not tell you that they're a part of it. They could have, been molested when they were little and or did the molesting, or incest might have been involved and they're ashamed and embarrassed or whatever is going on. It's just a lot more common than you know. And these people in this satanic system were actually raised and groomed and taught how to manipulate us normal folk. They know exactly what to do to be abusive to us and what we can't stand and what would cause loosh. Gain trust, do this, that, and the other thing, and whip it around and stab them in the back. And so it's really sad, but we're getting cleared out of that kind of energy right now in our world, and we are coming into the new earth, I believe, and we're coming into peaceful, harmonious times, and people they're gonna pretty much be forced to going into the 5D. So all of this is coming to an end, but we are, really having to stand up for ourselves at this time and see what's really truly going on, and take our heads out of the sand and take a good look at everything going on. I mean, everything, all the tyranny going on right now is it's all based on, it's false. Even the cops here's the crazy thing. A lot of people who are in it and programmed and brainwashed, including citizens, which are what are they, enslaved? They're slaves or indentured servants or something. So
Go ahead.
But I was going to say that so many people are in it, fooled just like the rest of us, thinking the whole thing is real when it's not. And even police officers are doing their jobs not knowing that what they're doing is actually illegal. And they're just doing it to keep their jobs and to pay the bills and to, in all of that. And I mean, it's really coming to a crescendo right now. And we're starting to see all of this for what it is, thank God. But how do we empower ourselves at this time? Like, if we catch ourselves dealing with that whole, or let's make it specific to what we're talking about today. If somebody is in a case similar to yours, like what do they do? What do they do to beat this? They don't get an attorney. You're saying do not get an attorney.
Yeah.
What do you
Unfortunately,
do?
it gets so complicated, and they'll get you on the technicalities.
Oh, yeah.
I realized I actually retained an attorney when I first filed because I knew I was too close to this. From practicing law, you don't want to be too close to a case because you get too emotional. You can't be level-headed. So I went and hired somebody. But then I saw all these decisions coming down, and I asked him, so when do we get a chance? When do we get a hearing? And he said, he actually looked at me. I said, they're making all these accusations. When do we get a hearing to, put them to the test? And he looked at me and he says, it doesn't work like that here. I said, what do you mean it doesn't work like that here? It's a due process issue. Due process from the federal court under the supremacy clause of the U.S. Constitution applies to every state, including, and I, gave him the textbook answer. He just looked at me and says, it doesn't work like that here. And he turned around and walked away. And at that moment, that's when I said, there's something going on here that I need to start looking into. And that's how I started doing research and found this law, this judge's rule that allows him to, exempt 3 cases. You're allowed to lie. I mean, that's insane. So I was faced with, do I stick with this attorney who's not doing anything for me and I'm going to wind up going bankrupt? He's going to wind up with whatever assets I do get. Or am I going to try and go pro se, and I may still lose and end up in the same place, but at least I can depend on myself. I was fortunate because I had a legal background, but I chose the route of depending on myself. And thank God that I did, because if I didn't, I would not be in the position I am now. I am now knocking on the door, looking to declare New York's system, of divorce and family law, having it declared as unconstitutional by the U.S. Supreme Court. And if I win, that decision will carry forth for the whole country. So it will help all of you people, and it will prevent them from stacking attorneys for the children, at least in private pay cases, right? Well, no, actually, that's not true in all cases, unless the children are abused and neglected. So you have to make a decision. Do you want to hire an attorney, go bankrupt, and have them do nothing for you, and cut a deal that's going to be favorable to the other side and at least squeak by? Or do you want to stand up and say, no, I'm going to try and do this on my own. I may still lose, but at least I'm saying no to the system, right? I'm going to try at least to fight the system. You have to make that decision. I will help people however I can, at least in New York, because it gets too complicated when we start going to all these different other states. But some things do transfer. For example, I made a lot of claims regarding federal rights. You can look at, I have a website, deanpllc.com, and I haven't posted my lawsuits, or at least the papers that I filed in the U.S. Supreme Court, but I will. So you can go back and check and look at my arguments. Some of those arguments, at least for federal law, would apply to all courts, right? As far as the First Amendment, the 14th Amendment, the Fifth Amendment. So you can try and do it on your own. Another way is, if you find yourself in a position where the judge is coming out with these absolutely insane rulings that have no basis in fact, law, policy, or reason, you have a right, I submit, although again, because the system has been so corrupt, they cover for each other. I submit that you have a right, fundamental right, to challenge the judge and ask them for reassurances of undivided loyalties. In the U.S. Constitution, under Article 6, Clause 3, every federal and state judge is required to be bound by oath or affirmation to the U.S. Constitution, which means that you owe loyalty to support and defend that federal Constitution. So what they're doing to me in state courts, that's a violation. And because it's system-wide throughout the entire state, that's a prima facie case to invoke the Insurrection Act, because you have a significant portion of the country that's essentially, rebelling against federal law. Can't do that. Be careful with that argument, because you really have to have your ducks in line. I do, so I'm making that argument. But how I got here is because every federal and state judge is bound by oath or affirmation to support, everybody knows to support the federal Constitution. It's just basic knowledge. It's even in the Bible, so basic, that you can't serve two masters, right? You'll hate one and resent the other, or, there's no way. And case law is common law, no less, is absolutely inundated with undivided loyalties to the master, right? The boss. Well, if a judge is supposed to have undivided loyalties to the U.S. Constitution, then how can he take or she take an oath of allegiance to a secret society, whether it be the Knights of Pythias, like that supervising judge, Judge LaBelle, Louis LaBelle, in the matrimonial part, or any other one, to Freemasonry or Skull and Bones, or, you pick the secret society. You can't. So what I've done in courts when I feel that the judge is clearly biased is I'll ask him, have you ever been affiliated with any secret society, club, or cabal, to include Freemasonry? And I had the trial judge in my divorce. When I asked her that question, it looked like I just ripped off all her clothes. And she was butt naked in the middle of Times Square. She was like, she didn't know what to do. She was looking around. And I knew by her reaction, you are.
Yeah.
Probably the Eastern Order of the Eastern Star, which is a Freemason organization, right? So I know where this is going to go. And that's another reason why I filed that collateral lawsuit against her, because I want that information. I want to depose her on that. She refused to answer my question. That's none of your business, she says. That's not relevant to here. Oh, really? If your loyalties are with somebody else and not the state and federal constitutions, that's not my business in this divorce trial. So I said, okay, I asked for the court-appointed attorney for the children, the person that you picked, Judge. I asked her if she's ever been a member or affiliated with a secret society, club, or cabal. She comes out and says, that's none of his business. Really? So, and then I challenged one other judge. It was the judge who eventually resigned or recused himself because of bias and prejudice against me. I asked him, have you ever been affiliated with a secret society, club, or cabal to include Freemason? And he went like this. He looked up to the left, which indicates that he's making it up, right? Fabricating. He's smiling. He says, no. Clearly the news line, to me anyway. I took that, the whole posture, the way it was. And everything that happened subsequent to that proved that he was lying. He has this vendetta against me, right? He's biased, prejudice. But now I have him on record saying that, no, he's not. So if it proves that he is, somewhere down the road, some law enforcement agency looks into this, he lied under oath. You can't do that as a judge. You're gone. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say real quick, the looking up to the left is also, it's like creativity. It could be fabricated, it could be a lie, but it could also be listening to your intuition, just saying.
Okay.
So not everybody who's looking up to the left is lying, just so you guys know that. Okay, go ahead.
Yes,
you can continue.
but when you're posed a specific question like that,
Yeah.
You don't need your intuition to answer that.
Exactly. That's why it was a lie. Yes.
Yes. So thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it. So going back to how we got here, what can your viewers do? They can challenge the judge. And again, but understand that when you do that, you're throwing down the gauntlet. You're saying, this is so crazy. I want to know who you are and who your loyalties are. And they can do one of three things. They can say yes. And if they say yes, then work to get them off. They could say no. Well, okay, then you have to deal with it. But if somewhere down the road, it proves that they are, now you come back and throw them off. And, maybe there's criminal charges associated with that. I don't know. Or they can refuse to answer the question. And then if that's the case, well, then you have, based on that alone, you can file a separate lawsuit, which again gets complicated, to try and determine whether or not she is. Because there are two U.S. courts of appeals, I believe, don't quote me on this, I think it's the 6th and the 7th Circuit Courts of Appeal have held that a judge's affiliation with somebody involved in the trial, like another party or their attorney, violates or could violate the due process clause, right? And it goes to neutrality. Of course, it just makes sense. The U.S. Supreme Court passed on that decision, but it did acknowledge these two decisions from the lower courts, the appellate courts. So there's federal precedent on that. And because the federal constitution is just a floor and state courts state constitutions can provide even more protection, it could violate the state constitution as well. So yes, get them off. No, okay, I'll see you later. If you're lying, you're going to get thrown off. And maybe, well, let's go to another court and we're going to see if it's yes or no. We're going to determine it. That's what they can do. I'd like to just back up to what you talked about earlier. You mentioned citizens, right? And I know that there's a lot of buzz going on right now that citizens really means X, Y, Z. You're a serf, whatever. Well, and there's also, along with that, there's a big push to go back to the original Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
Go and look.
Which
again,
I just heard from somebody today that the original Constitution was just signed back in recently, just days ago.
Yes, I
Did
heard
you
that
hear
as well.
that too? Oh,
I
you
heard that as
did?
well.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah, that would be great. But
I'm thinking that may have even had, I just did a video that you might want to watch later, the Great Awakening that comes out just before this one, maybe. But there's a question in there that talks about why there was a celebration at the White House. And I just got an intuitive hit that it might have had to do with the reinstating of the Constitution, going back to the original Constitution also, in addition to what I was saying. So,
that would be
yay.
great. That would be
Yay.
great.
Okay, so
Yeah.
go ahead, continue.
So I can only go by the Constitution, the version that's out there now. If you go back, and you can do, your viewers can do this themselves. It's very easy. Search for the word citizen in the Constitution. You'll see that it appears in the original version of the Constitution, the body, not the amendments, right? People say, oh yeah, the 14th Amendment made us all slaves because it talks about citizenship. Well, the original body of the Constitution, from my understanding, what I'm reading, also used the term citizen. If that's the case, then this whole distinction about because they're saying that we're citizens really goes out the window. So I think more study, more research is needed to verify whether or not that's a legitimate argument.
Okay.
From what I've seen so far, it's not. That's not to say that the system is not crooked. It certainly is. But I don't know if, this distinction or emphasis on the use of the word citizen is really all that relevant.
That just proves that you're telling the truth today about all of this, because, why would you say all of this stuff and then not, you know what I mean? It's cool. I like it.
Yeah,
You're not just buying into the whole thing. And I think that's important as we go forward. When we're
Yes.
being discerning of all of this, we don't just jump on the bandwagon and believe all of it. We look at every piece and analyze it and really take a good look like he's done. And you check it out for yourself and you see, is that true? Because right now they're trying to group everybody in these big generalizations. It's about the science. It's all the stuff that it's like, really, what does that mean? Exactly what does that mean is about the science. So where's the science coming from? Who are these scientists exactly? So I love that you've kind of picked it apart and you're like, nah, I don't really think that applies. So
Yeah. Well,
speaks
it's
to your
what
integrity.
I do, right?
Yeah.
Also, as to be a good lawyer, really, you need to do that. Also, what people can do to protect themselves, they can learn the law, and some of it is not difficult, and it's very easy to pick up. So, I refuse to wear a mask. I have for over a year. I actually got fired for not wearing a mask, even though I was 100% within the face covering policy.
Wow.
They tried to throw me out of several stores. I stood my ground. I refused to leave, demanded that I be served. One time I actually just left the money on the counter at ShopRite and I walked out. They tried to do some crazy things to me. An assistant manager and the guy who was checking masks at the door wound up getting fired because of what they did to me. At least that's what I found out afterwards. And a police officer issued me a citation that was false on its face. So now, again, I'm going to have to limit myself to just New York law, right? So New York, we had Governor Andy Cuomo came out with this mandate. You have to wear a face mask, essentially. Well, I knew that a mandate means nothing and that I have certain, medical rights and personal rights, and I refused to wear a mask. And his mandate didn't mean anything to me. She issued me a citation under the New York State public health law. And it says, you refuse to wear a mask. Well, the mandate was promulgated under the executive law, not the public health law. So issue me a citation in the public health law didn't mean anything. You could just throw it out. So I went to court, tried to make a limited appearance to say, no, you don't have any jurisdiction over me. They tried to appoint an attorney for me. In fact, they already had one appointed for me when I walked in. Wait a minute. You don't even know what my claims are going to be or whether or not I can even afford an attorney, right? You can only get an attorney if you can't afford one. And if you're facing a certain amount of jail time. Here, I was only facing, if you were to follow the law, a fine. But they were trying to charge me under something else, which didn't apply. It was complete fabrication. So I called them out on that. And oh, by the way, the police officer submitted I can't remember the title for it, but basically an affidavit saying that I did X, Y, Z, and that violated the law. And that was a complete lie too. And at the bottom of that paper that she signed, it says a false statement in this document is a Class A misdemeanor, subject up to, a year in jail. So I sent that off to the district attorney. I said, here you go arrest, go prosecute this police officer because she just committed a crime. Showed up for court again. They filed a new affidavit. The police officer submitted a new affidavit. This time she lied 2 times in that piece of paper. So I sent it off to the district attorney again. Now go arrest her. Now you have 3 crimes that you can go and arrest her for and stop prosecuting this case against me. They refused to do it. They kept coming after me. And I stuck to my grounds and I kept showing up. They said, well, you can't come inside the courthouse unless you put on a mask or show us that you've had the vaccination. No, I don't. I don't have to do either one. And you have to arraign me within a certain amount of time. If you don't, you have to throw out this case. So they brought a computer outside the courthouse and they arraigned me there. And then they made me come back and I tried to file papers. The court officer says, no, I'm not authorized to take this, but this is for you. It's from the judge. Wait a minute. You can have served me papers, but I'm not allowed to give you papers. No. So I just threw it at his feet because I know under New York law, that's good service. Right. So I gave him a whole big reason why this case was all BS essentially and throw the whole thing out. Eventually they dismissed the case because I refused to appear. And they also issued a warrant of arrest because I refused to appear in court. Really? So I sent them a letter off, I sent a letter to them explaining how that was in complete violation of the law, etc., blah, 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 and that they will enforce it at their own legal peril. We've yet to see what happens. This is all a background to say, under New York state law, the only thing that governs the wearing of a face covering is section Title 10, New York Code Rules and Regulations, NYCRR, section 2.60. In that regulation, as well as in the governor's original mandate, it says that you have to, in a nutshell, you have to wear a face covering unless, you have to wear a face covering if you can, quote, medically tolerate a face covering.
Right.
You have to be able to medically tolerate it. Well, because that term is actually part of the regulation, I can come up and say, well, I can't medically tolerate it. Excuse me. Let me hold on a second. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
So I can come back and say, no, I can't medically tolerate one. Now the prosecution has the burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that I can medically tolerate a face mask. Well, how can you do that if, number one, I don't give you access to my medical records, right? Number two, I exercise my right under the First Amendment to not speak. So you can put me on the stand, you can ask me questions, or just one-on-one, and I don't have to answer you. Or if it is a criminal charge, my right to not incriminate myself under the Fifth Amendment. Either way, you're not going to get the information from me or my medical records. So how are you going to prove your case? And because it's in this Department of Health regulation, they have exclusive jurisdiction to enforce health law, public health law. So the Department of Health has to send in an investigator to do this. And the worst thing that can happen, according to the regulation, is $1,000 fine. It's going to cost you a whole lot more than that in legal fees. And you're going to have to wind up hiring outside counsel probably, because now I'm going to file a class action lawsuit against you on behalf of me and everybody else that has been wrongfully prosecuted under this health regulation. And we're going to win that one as well. So know the law. That's how you can protect yourself. Know the law. In New York State, 10 NYCRR section 2.60, you have to be able to medically tolerate a face mask. They can't prove that they must prove that you can, which they never will be able to do. And I'll add this, that you and you alone are the one that determines what you can or cannot medically tolerate. You can go for any given malady. You can go to the top 100 doctors in the world. They could all tell you to do or recommend that you do the same exact thing. But you can say, no, I don't want to. Nobody can force you to accept any type of medical treatment or medical care. They can't. So you determine what you can or cannot medically tolerate. That's it. End of story. So I would love to see people stand up for themselves and, and enforce their rights. Just do it.
Yeah. And is it true that mandates are like a voluntary agreement if you agree to them? They're not
Mandate is
law, are
nothing.
they?
As far as I see it, it's a wish. It's the governor's wish. I'm entering a mandate. Really? Well, Merry Christmas. I hope Santa brings it to you because I don't have to do anything about it. You're not the king. You're not the emperor. You don't get.
So it isn't a law. People take it as a law.
No, because they don't know the law. They don't take the time to listen, and they operate in fear.
Yeah, I know some if you never do buy into it, and if you never do, put the sign up out on your door as a business owner and stuff, I think you're more free doing that than somebody who goes ahead and agrees to this thing, and then they can be fined. Whereas somebody who's, said, no, I'm not participating in this at all, they can't be fined. From what I understand, it's like somehow there was more of a case for them to be able to pursue like fining you if you agreed to it in the first place than if you put a protest from the start, they can't do a thing. Is that even true?
I haven't looked into those specific sets of facts, right? So I hesitate to speak to that. But I will say this, there are times, and the law is even clear on this, when if you disagree with something, the proper thing to do is to just walk away. For example, when I challenged the personal jurisdiction of the town court, where they were trying to file these false, actually fabricated, charges against me, these fabricated charges against me, I said, you don't have personal jurisdiction over me. And because you don't, here's a set of papers where not only do you not have jurisdiction, but because of this decision by an appellate court, it says that if I disagree with your personal jurisdiction, the thing for me to do is just walk away and not deal with you anymore.
Really?
And that's what I did. That it was in those papers that I dropped at the court officer's feet. It was like, this is the last time I'm ever showing up again, and this is why. See ya. So I think there may be validity to what you just said. If you stake something in the ground saying no from the get-go, then you're good, or at least you have a better argument. Because once you get into the personal jurisdiction or you consent to that, the law says, no, you've waived your objections to that. Now you will always have personal jurisdiction, at least for that one case anyway.
Well,
yeah, that's something to look into if you have a business. Absolutely.
And well, this would have been nice to know before all this madness happened. Because it's like so many business owners, they just didn't know any better. And they were like, well, I guess I have to do it then. It's a mandate, just slap the sign up on the door. Everybody else is doing it. I'm just so proud of those businesses who said, that doesn't sound right to me. And they wouldn't, I just love those guys. And they're going against the grain, but they're the ones making a difference in our world right now. All of you who are rising up in your own special way, whether it be not wearing a mask, or not, I know a gal who just took a trip and she was the only one out of a whole flight of 300 people who did not wear a mask. She just refused. She just wouldn't do it. So we need a lot more people rising up in all these different various ways.
You know,
So
if people want inspiration and they believe that we truly are in a war, there's a website for Medal of Honor recipients, and it talks and has the citation of every single person that has ever been awarded the Medal of Honor. I strongly recommend that you go and read some of these citations, especially the ones from World War II and after, because they really fleshed out, the citation and what these people did. And some of these citations really bring me to tears. I mean, the bravery and the selfless devotion to duty and others is just absolutely phenomenal.
that's incredible.
Compare that to what we have to go through today. Just say, no, I'm not wearing a mask. Okay, you're going to put me in jail? Fine. How long do I have to be there? A day, 2 days, 3 days? Compare that to what these people went through in World War II for their war. This is our call. This is a time for us to stand up. And and we're not even being asked to a call to arms. Just say no. And if you get thrown in jail, listen to me. I got put in jail for an absolute bogus charge. The judge, a different judge, one that I haven't talked about yet, actually lied in his order of protection, saying that I was there, I was present, and I was informed about it, and I never was. He actually dismissed me from the courtroom, had me leave, and then he entered it, knowing that the very next day I was going to try and see my kids. They had me arrested for that. And then because of that, I had to spend a couple of days in jail, right? But when I was in jail, I filed 11 grievances. One of them, and they were all winners. I did civil rights law, primarily with prisoners and inmates for several years. I know the law. I filed 11 grievances. One of them was granted to me within 15 minutes. They came and gave me the rules. 3 of those other 10 would have cost the jail millions of dollars to correct. And I had absolute winning cases against that as too.
Wow.
So you could be a force. Go ahead, put me in jail. Now I tell them, go ahead, put me in jail. I'll follow up on my grievances. I'll have this county upside down by the time I'm done. And I will. So learn the law, be a force, be unmanageable, uncontrollable, but peacefully. You can do it. It will drive them crazy. They don't know how to handle me. They don't know how to handle me.
We need more men to rise up right now. We need more men to rise up, because I know a lot of pretty fierce women, but
Too many
you're
man
doing an
buns.
incredible job. What was that?
Too many man buns. Too many guys with man buns. Sorry, I don't do man buns. Even if I had hair, I wouldn't do a man bun.
What is that website where people can check out the medals and things?
Just type in Medal of Honor
Medal
website.
of Honor.
It'll come right up.
Okay.
Yep. I think it's like medalofhonor.com or something like that. But really, it is
incredible.
Absolutely inspirational. Look at what they had to do for their war and compare that to what we're being asked to do or can do for our war.
Yay. Wow.
One thing I will like to say, that the biggest disappointment in all of this is probably the federal court system. An absolute disgrace. And the federal court system, in my humble opinion, covers and protects the corrupt state court system. And as an example of that, I'll give you this. The domestic relations exception doctrine. To me, that's absolute proof of this corruption. So I told you some of what was going on in family and divorce court. And I knew that this was wrong, that this was violating several constitutionally protected rights, God-given rights. So the thing to do is then to bring a lawsuit in federal court saying, look, what the state is doing here is wrong. You need to fix it, right? Now, every first-year law student learns that when a judge addresses an issue, they use the acronym IRAC: issue, rule, application of the rule to the facts of the case, and then they reach a conclusion. IRAC, IRAC. After, what you're not supposed to do is find the conclusion that you want to reach and then work backwards. Well, if I want to reach this conclusion, that means I have to get this rule and I need these sets of facts. Now I can write my decision. You circumvent it. That's not the way it's supposed to. it's supposed to work. But eventually, once they do that and they reach their final conclusion, then and only then can they decide if that decision is going to be published in an official reporter or perhaps in the New York Law Journal or something, or is it going to remain unpublished? Right? You can't make that decision until you have the conclusion, the final order or decision. The domestic relations exception doctrine, which the Second Circuit Court of Appeals over New York, Connecticut, and Vermont adopted that, says that we don't listen to issues or to lawsuits involving these types of domestic relations issues, custody, child support, visitation, or things that are on the verge of those things. We just don't do it. And this rule applies to unpublished decisions. What? How can you say that this rule applies to unpublished decisions when you don't even have the conclusion yet? I just went through how you have to do IRAC, right? So how can you throw a case out at the beginning of the case, as soon as it's filed, when you don't even know what the results are? You haven't taken discovery, right? You haven't had a trial to determine what the facts are. It's insane. So this domestic relations exception doctrine is used to throw out lawsuits that threaten the authority of the New York courts to continue their unconstitutional customs and practices.
Wow.
Absolutely. Yeah,
wow.
Absolutely. And I'll say that to any court in America. And I've actually made that argument to the U.S. Supreme Court, but they decided not to hear the case. So the U.S. Supreme Court case, and I know that they're busy and it's very hard to get selected, but here I'm talking about, a custom and practice, at least in New York State, and actually the domestic relations exception doctrine is utilized by several circuit courts. So we're talking about this rule is absolutely abomination of a judicial rule affecting millions of people. Goes back to the 25 million people that are being erased, right? By the U.S. Supreme Court saying, no, we don't want to hear this case. You're really saying, well, it's okay. Let it just keep happening. Really? It's threatening the network, or excuse me, the fabric of our society, the family. It's allowing millions of children and good parents to be, brutalized through the judicial system and go on and on. So that was a really big pill, or hard pill for me to swallow, that the federal court system couldn't care less about this. And there was also another reason why I thought it was complete, rubbish that the federal court used this rule to throw out my cases. I sued, it was like 7 people, because they were all lying. And I had absolute proof that all these people were lying, or they were committing, gross violations of ethical rules and the Constitution. Mm-hmm. The only person that was in there was my ex-wife, and I wasn't asking about custody, visitation, or any of those third rail issues. So how can you say that a domestic relations exception doctrine applies to me in this case when I don't even have a domestic relationship with the people that I'm suing? Right? It's strictly
crazy.
Third party. I have no domestic relationship. So how can the domestic relationship exception doctrine work? It's just absolutely absurd. It was a complete fabrication of the rule and the facts. And they were just protecting the state courts.
Wow.
That still bothers me, because the federal court system is supposed to protect the people from bad state and local policies. That's one of the things that they were put in charge of, right? Or they were given jurisdiction to address. They just balked, absolutely balked, and so did the U.S. Supreme Court. That really bothered me. Still does. And not just for me. I mean, again, millions of people out there that are affected by this. Hopefully the 19th president will address this soon. Him and his team.
Yeah. All right. So I would like to do a blessing for all of you, all those 25 million
Yes.
who are in this situation being erased, to counter it. I want to counter it with this blessing to
I would
help
love that.
empower you guys to win your cases. Okay. So, mm. So relax, drop your shoulders, and any of you can join me in this prayer. Just have the intention to help all of these vanishing parents get the upper hand and win these battles to get their children back. All right. Amanata chain sasela. He came pumamahoma ana e. Sanse shiki he na ila pumama anse. Shishi naikela. Sese hela naike. Hepempema ma ai. Hentantela. Shinchin sasela ike e pumama anse. Se la shiki aya mama an. Tata sanse shi na ai. Hala eke pumama anshense. Ha ake ens. Shishi ina ai huma antatin sa ila ina ai. Well, I saw a sun, and a sun is a really good sign of healing to come and joyous celebration. So I think that's a really good sign.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Amy. I
You're
appreciate this opportunity to expose what's going on, not just in
Yeah.
New York, but throughout the country. And hopefully
Thank you so
people
much.
will use this.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for doing this.
No, thank you.
And just in time too. I wanted this to come out before the holidays, just to give parents some hope that are in these situations. Also, do you have any resources that you want to share with anyone right now, or should I just put them underneath the video?
Well, they can go and look at I strongly recommend that they go and look at the papers that I've filed with the U.S. Supreme Court, 3 so far in 2019. The ones that I just filed earlier this week haven't been posted on the Supreme Court website yet. But I will also add all of those papers to my website if people are interested. I'm not looking for clients, I'm not looking. So I just put that up there for your consumption, and hopefully you can use it, as well as a couple other documents, both pertaining to
Can you
this.
Can you repeat the website or spell it out?
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. It's deempllc.com. That's Delta Echo Mike Papa Lima Charlie.com. And I also put some stuff in there about the mask policy and how you can,
Oh, good.
how you can beat that. Yeah.
Yay. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. You're just so awesome. And you're such
Thank
an
you.
inspiration at this time. So I'll be including you in my prayers.
Thank you.
You're going to get those kids back.
Yeah. The children. Don't pray for me. Pray for the children.
You know what? I'm going to do another blessing right now for that, because I did my blessing originally was to bring all these families together, but I'm going to put protection around those kids right now too. Okay, hang on.
Thank you.
Shinjin Pumu Mahama na teke la san se he shinke pumahama ai hala son se shi ina aike ho oma ama shin se sike la hana tai hompopo ama shins se he la anake impumum shi ina. Well, it felt like Spirit was actually talking to the children through me and reassuring them that everything's going to be okay, and to listen to their intuition and stand up against people who don't seem to be, of par. And just, if anything is questionable, get away from it, stand up to it, and listen to your gut, and escape any kind of dangerous situation that feels not right. So, okay.
Thank you, Amy. This has been great. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and thanks everybody for watching. Please spread the word and share this video to anyone you know who might be being erased themselves. So, okay. Talk to you later. Bye.